All right, so what I want to do next is derive formulas for the sine of the difference of two angles and the cosine and sine of the sum of two angles, and then we'll do it with the tangent. And these are going to go much, much more quickly than the previous ones did. All right, so what I want here is I want a formula for the cosine of the sum, right? So I want to know what is the cosine of A plus B. All right, well, watch. Here's what I'm gonna do. This is the cosine of A minus B. Right? I have a formula for the cosine of the difference. So all I'm gonna do is drop these things into it. This is the cosine of A times the cosine of minus B plus the sine of A times the sine of minus B. Now I'm going to use my negative angle formulas. This is the cosine of A. The cosine of minus B is the same as the cosine of B. The sine of minus B is minus the sine of B. Right, so this will be minus sine A sine B. And that's it. Right? That's my difference formula. I'm done. Okay, and I want to make a point about this because I remember many years ago when I was probably still an undergrad at this point. I was taking a senior level math class, and I remember the professor was kind of giving everybody a hard time once, and he said, you know, when you're asked to prove things, we all kept trying to go back to the definitions and do things from scratch. And he said, look, use the things you already know, right? Like I did here, right? I already had this formula for the difference. So instead of drawing triangles, unit circles and angles and circles and all the rest of that song and dance I did to find the difference formula, I just used the difference formula, and the whole thing worked out much, much more quickly. And what I want to point out to you here, because there's going to be a lot of these formulas. Like I said in a previous lecture, trigonometry is a very formula-rich environment. So you need to look for patterns to help you remember these things. The cosine, sum, and difference formulas are identical except for the signs. Right? So the way I remember these, cosine A plus or minus B is equal to cosine A cosine B minus plus sine of A sine of B. Right? The cosines stay together in one product, the sines stay together in the other product, and the sign in the middle, the plus or minus sign, is just reversed from the way it is in the original. Okay, so that covers the cosine. How about the sine? How about the sine of the sum of two angles? Right, well, here's what I'm going to do. Right, and again, I'm going to rely on formulas that I already know. I'm looking for the sine of A plus B. Right, well, here's kind of my thought process. I'm thinking, okay, I know how to do this with the cosine. How can I rewrite this as a cosine? All right, well, here we have a formula. The sine of A plus B is equal to the cosine of pi over 2 minus A plus B. Is that cofunction identity. All right, so now I'm going to rearrange this a little bit. I'm just going to distribute that minus sign. This is the cosine pi over 2 minus A minus B. And now I'm going to group this again. Cosine pi over 2 minus A minus B. Now I'm going to use my cosine difference formula. Right, this is the cosine of pi over 2 minus A times the cosine of B. Remember what we just talked about. The signs are reversed. So since I have minus in the original, I'm going to do plus down here. The sine of pi over 2 minus a times the sine of b. And now I'm going to use my cofunction formula again. The cosine of pi over 2 minus a is the sine of a, still times the cosine of b, plus, and what happens here? The sine of pi over 2 minus a is the cosine of a, still times the sine of b. And there's my formula. Right, there's my formula for the sine of the sum of two angles. You notice, I'm trying to make connections to make these things easy to remember. With the sines, the sign in the middle stayed the same. With a plus here, and it's a plus here. And now, instead of having cosine A, cosine B, and sine A, sine B, I mix and match. It's sine A, cosine B, cosine A, sine B. Okay. Next one, and I know I'm cranking these out, right? I want to get through all of these, get us a complete list, and then in the next lecture, we'll take a step back. Well, we won't take a step back, but we'll actually do some things, do some calculations with these formulas. All right, so the next one, sine of the difference. Well, look, I'm going to use the exact same maneuver I used before. The sine of A minus B is the sine of A plus minus B. And now I've got a sine formula, right? This is the sine of A cosine of minus B plus the cosine of A times the sine of minus B. And what happens now? Now I'm going to use those negative angle formulas. This is the sine of A cosine of B, and that's sine of minus B. That's minus sine B. So this is minus cosine A sine B. Okay, so we've got the same kind of pattern taking place here. I can rewrite this, the sine of A plus or minus B equals the sine of A cosine of B. You notice this time they stayed the same. When I had a minus up here, I had a minus down here. So now they'll stay the same. This is plus or minus cosine A sine B. Right? There's my sine formula. Okay, so what's left? Tangents. Right, we still need to talk about tangents. All right, so how are we going to do tangents? Well, I want the tangent of A plus B. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very common trick. I hate to say trick. A very common technique when working with the tangent. I'm going to replace this with sines and cosines. So this is the sine of A plus B divided by the cosine of A plus B. And I've got formulas for these things. This is the sine of A cosine of B plus the sine of B cosine of A divided by the cosine of A times the cosine of B. Remember, the cosine reverses, so this is minus sine of A times the sine of B. Okay, now what? Because I really don't want to stop there. That's not a particularly pleasant to look at formula. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by the cosine of A times the cosine of B. All right, so just kind of bear with me. right? And watch what happens. So really, and then I'm going to distribute. I'm going to divide everything by that expression. So this is going to become sine A cosine B over cosine A cosine B. You see what's about to happen there, right? Plus sine B cosine A over cosine A cosine B, all over cosine A cosine B divided by cosine A cosine B minus sine A sine B over cosine A cosine B. Now, a lot of canceling is going to happen. In the first part, the top left part, those cosines of B go away. In the right-hand part, the cosines of A go away. And in the denominator, the cosines of A and the cosines of B go away. All right, so what's left? Look, up here in the numerator, I have sine A cosine A. That's the tangent of A. Then on the right-hand side, I have the sine of B and the cosine of B. That is plus the tangent of B. Then in the denominator, this first bit here, that's just 1, minus, what's going on over here? Sine A cosine A is the tangent of A, and sine B cosine B is the tangent of B. And that's it. Right, there's my formula for the tangent of the sum of two angles. And it's kind of nice that it also came out in terms of tangents. Right? That's kind of an elegant way for this to end up. Okay, so that leaves one more, right? That leaves the tangent of A minus B. And I'm not going to do that one. I'm going to leave that one. I want you to try that one on your own. See if you can kind of work through the same kind of reasoning that we just did here with the tangent of the sum. All right, so what I've done here, I've just summarized everything. These are the 6 formulas that we just developed. And like I said before, trigonometry, very, very formula rich. And you really do kind of need to know these. My advice, first is lots of practice. The more you use them, the more familiar you're going to get, the stronger those memories are going to become, right? The more these are going to be in your head. And for practical purposes, I like index cards, right? Put these on an index card because they kind of go together. Put these on a card and these on a card, and just kind of have them there in front of you, right? So you're using them as a quick reference. And again, practice. That's what's going to really get these ideas into your head. Okay, so what's next? Next we're going to do some examples, right? We're going to see how we can use these things to actually do some calculations.